All right, I think our live stream is up and running. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Ember Framework Core Team AMA Ask Me Anything live stream event. My name is Jen Weber, and today I'm here with some of the Ember Framework Core Team members and our guest facilitator, Carl Becker. Ember is a JavaScript framework that provides everything you need to build modern web applications. The Ember project is guided by a group of developers from different companies known as core team members. Together with the community, the core team members work to ensure the project's long-term success, stability for users, excellent developer experience, framework accessibility, and more. There are multiple core teams, and today we're speaking with some of the members who focus on the framework itself. To learn more about why Ember is a good choice for your own web app projects, you can visit whyember.com. With that, I'd like to pass things over to Carl.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name is Carl Becker. I'm the technical co-founder of a small company called Third Iron. We've used Ember at Third Iron for over 6 years to power our 2 web products, Browsine and LibKey. These Ember apps are used by researchers to stay up to date with peer-reviewed journal articles at over 1,200 libraries, ranging from universities to corporations, hospitals, and government agencies. Ember has been instrumental in our small company's success, which has allowed us to grow our software development team like our company and many other companies are growing now. And I think it's safe to say Ember has helped all the careers of the framework team members who are joining us today. For everyone watching, we hope Ember is helping your career in life too. I'm excited to host this question and answer session with the Ember Frameworks team. Today, we are going to have some questions that readers of the Ember Times have submitted. And we also encourage anyone watching the live stream to post your own questions here on YouTube. We'll spend some time answering those questions sent ahead of time and also try to get a few of the live questions too. So let's go ahead, go around the room and have all of our Frameworks team members introduce themselves. How about each person shares one of your favorite things you've worked on in the past year, and then popcorn to someone else. Let's say popcorn, Melanie.
I have a meeting right now. I didn't realize that was a meeting.
Go ahead.
Dad, you are unmuted.
All right. Hi, I'm Melanie Sumner, and my focus on the framework is accessibility. And the thing I've most recently worked on is pairing with Yehuda to make unique ID a feature that we can implement in template-only components. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to popcorn over to Ed.
Hi, I'm Ed Falkner. I've worked on a lot of different things in Ember. Most lately, though, I'm focused on the build system and our next generation build tooling around Embroider. That's what I've been working on. Most recently, I've ported some more add-ons like Ember Page Title to the new V2 add-on format. And popcorn to Robert.
Hey, I am Robert. I've been mostly working lately with Ed on the Embroider side of things, trying to push our LinkedIn's Embroider adoption forward and get more apps deployed to production and sort of smooth rough edges so that we can begin making it more feasible to have it be the default out of the box experience. I think we're getting close, but I'm sure we'll talk about that more later. I will kick it over to Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie. I most recently have been working on support for V2 add-ons in Ember Observer. And generally, you'll find me doing the releases of Ember Source every 6 weeks. Popcorn to Matt.
Howdy, everybody. My name is Matthew Beal. I'm an employee at Adapar. We've been using Ember for a long time, since before 1.0, longer than I've been there. The fun thing I've worked on recently was right before my paternity leave for my second daughter, and right after she was born, a lot of work on getting Ember 4.0 across the finish line. Really, I just want to shout out Nathaniel Furness, Simon Imig, Serge Aspatov, Scott Newcomer, Bert DeBlock, Igor T, and Katie herself for helping us a lot get that across the finish line. It took a lot of people, and a lot of lines of code were removed from the framework. So I think everyone should be really happy with that progress. Only took us a little longer than we wanted, but it's great to have out of the way so we can move forward. I'm going to stop myself there and hand things to Godfrey.
Hello, I am Guthrie, work at
Tilda, and worked at a couple of things in the past in Ember, and lately I've just been filling in the gaps here and there whenever I have time. And in the last little bit, I've mostly been focused on breaking down the features we have in Ember and into the smaller fundamental primitive pieces, so that we can encourage more experimentation outside of the core framework, and have been yeah, that's been fun. So that's me, and I will hand it off to Yehuda.
Hey, I'm Yehuda. I also work at Tilda. Most of what I've been doing is having 2 kids during COVID who are under 5. But in addition to that, most of what I do in general is R&D, I would say, like Glimmer 2, whatever. And so I've been doing 2 things. I've been doing a new R&D thing, which maybe talk about later, and just general Polaris planning, like a combination of talking to everyone about what their hopes and dreams are, and just thinking about how to package it up and what the process is going to be. So that's me. I don't know, popcorn off to Tom, I guess.
Hey, I'm Tom. I'm an Ember developer with about 10 years of experience working in the framework. I work at LinkedIn, like some of these folks as well. And the thing I've been working on most recently that I'm really excited about is kind of what Yehuda mentioned, a little R&D projects, doing some more exploration. For me, one of the big things I've been thinking about is how do you make data structures, data flow and reactivity portable between frameworks?
Fantastic. Great. Thanks for introducing yourselves, everyone. Let's hop right into it, to some of the Q&As that were pre-submitted. We're going to start off. Yehuda, you'd mentioned something about Polaris, and one of the questions is, heard here and there about Polaris Edition. What's the process for planning Polaris? Question for whoever wants to answer.
I'll start and people can backfill. So I think it's the thing to realize about our general process is that a lot of everything we've done over the past few years has been around improving and formalizing our edition process in general. And so just to give a back of the envelope sketch of it, basically leading up to an edition, there's like new features that get added, and then often a major release to remove deprecated features. And then the purpose of the process of an edition is to figure out what features that have already landed or at least have already been approved that are in implementation work. Which of those is going to make it into the edition? Because the purpose of an edition is to polish up and reframe and re-describe what Ember is doing in newer terms, both for like better compatibility with how the ecosystem is talking about it, but also because over time things change. So the Octane edition, for example, was highly focused on, I would say, the reactivity programming model and interoperability with native classes and that and Glimmer components, right? So that was what the Octane edition was for. And so if you look under the hood, there's like 1,000,001 features, and people could, talk about what the status of them are. But at a high level, at some point we decided Glimmer components, native classes, a few other things are like the 10 poles of this edition, and we're going to make sure that we redo the documentation around those changes, make sure all those features are highly polished, any rough edges around that became stable but still need work are done. Anybody who's having trouble transitioning has CodeMods, right? So there's all these polish things around some central reframing, which is like Glimmer. I would say if you have to say one thing, it's like Glimmer components is the new component model of Ember is the Octane story, right? So Polaris is that's what an edition is, right? And so you can look at a lot of things like Embroider or whatever as important, not or whatever, but important 10 poles. The first part of the edition planning process is to figure out what is the big framing. So in, like I said, Octane, it was Glimmer components are the new components. And I think Polaris is definitely going to have something to do with Embroider, something to do with TypeScript, something to do with finalize, like getting rid of no longer making Ember.object a requirement for like just doing basic things, right? So there's a bunch of things like that. And the first part of the process is like, how do you package that up in something that is like Glimmer components or the new components? And then there's a project management process. I think for the people on the live stream, the most important thing to know is that there is a community, there's a process of community breakout sessions. Once we figure out what the rough scope is and what the rough slogan is, I guess, there we break out the work items into pieces and do community breakouts where people can show up and say, you know, I don't normally participate, but this, I really think that we need to focus on this aspect of the router or embroider or whatever. And those in Octane, those conversations had incredible impact and really helped shape how we scope the details. So I guess look out for that. And it should be happening in the next, you know, few weeks or something. We'll start talking about that. The last thing I would say is we've had a lot of processes over the years, and my mental model for what we're doing here is we're converging around this like addition process and seasonal structure, which I'm going to talk about way more in my keynote this year in EmberConf. And so a good way, like if the thing you're wondering about is not basic, I'll just be explicit. Like I think we used to have a more explicit roadmap process, and I think that process has largely been subsumed in most ways by the addition process. And there's still some open questions about some of the details, like calls for blog posts and like the annual structure. But the reason that you haven't heard about that in a year or two is because the addition planning process has largely subsumed the purpose of that. Okay, the end for me.
I'll jump in if I can, Carl, with just one other thought, because I'm sure a lot of people have like thoughts about the contents of Polaris, but just to talk about the like what we're thinking about in terms of how we plan it. Maybe another important constraint is that we're trying to scope it so that we are able to ship something in months, not in years. And I think that's an important constraint. It's not going to serve the framework well if we're like, oh, the next edition is the pie in the sky. That's not going to be around for a year and a half or 2 years. So we're trying to make sure that we are giving ourselves like achievable scoped goals, and then we can ship that and move on to the next part of it.
Excellent. Anyone? Thanks, Yehuda. Thanks, Matthew. Anyone else want to add to that? All right. Well, let's move on. We've got another question that was pre-submitted. It says, so this one is maybe a little, here's how it goes. It says, it feels like core team involvement in Ember.js development slowed this past year. Is the core team baking something in the background? Are some people on hiatus or doing less open source software? Who would like to take it?
I will go first again, but this is actually a personal question targeted at everyone. Well, targeted is a little pointed, but it's a question of everyone here, so people can feel free to say it. And I think that's the first thing that I would say is like, with an eye towards like governance and team structure and whatever, there is always an ebb and flow of individual people. And at any given time, some people who used to be more active are less active, and other people who used to be less active are more active. And so I think part of this is you are definitely, if you only pay attention to the ebb, then you don't notice the up and comers. So I think other people might have a better sense of who to call out there. But I think while there are definitely some people who used to be more active or less active, and that's like always true in every year of Ember, there are also people who are becoming more active, and I think that's good. I'll just speak, but I also want to speak for myself, which is to say that like I see my personal role in Ember, like I said earlier, as both a like keep the wheels on in terms of that like Melanie is much better than me at keeping the wheels on at project management, and she ran the Octane project management. That's also true about Guthrie. But I try to keep the vision wheels on, like not just like the pie in the sky, but like what are we actually doing? What are we driving at here? I sometimes say like we're pointing the ship in some direction. What is it? Right. And so a big part of what I do day to day is just like talk to people, like I said before, and that's very invisible. And in particular, right before the edition planning starts, it's like extremely invisible, right? Like we have the only people who know I'm doing any of it is the framework team, because it's like intrinsically it's not private in the secret sense. It's private in the sense that I am having conversations with people one-on-one mostly, right? So that's a big part of it. The other part, as Tom mentioned, is I've done historically like a bunch of R&D projects. The ones that are most apparent are Glimmer 1 and Glimmer 2. I also did a pretty big refactor of like the parser internals, whatever, like a year or two ago, that was like the equivalent of like Glimmer 2.5 or something. And there's a lot like that. And so there is an active project that I'm working on right now that you don't have to wonder about. Like you can go to my GitHub and I do almost everything in public. The reason you haven't heard a ton about it is just, first of all, from Ember's perspective. So let me just say a high level point, which is like every time I do a new R&D project for Ember, the purpose of it is to generalize something that Ember does so that it's less specific to what Ember is doing right now, so that it will be like more general than Ember's current status. And that has two useful properties. One of them is it's like better for Ember's future, but also it's better for things that are not Ember. And that's like has always been true about any of these projects. The current project, like Tom said earlier briefly, is like that, but it's like the generalization of our data flow system, so that it will be a better foundation for Ember in the future, but also like so that it can be used plausibly in other environments. And again, the reason we haven't heard about it is because like the first few months of any of these R&D, like probably for every successful one, there's like several failed ones, right? So I feel really confident now about this one, but that's only in the past few weeks that's even true. So yes, like me, Yehuda personally, this is like is important. That's why I started by saying there's a lot of people. That's me, Yehuda personally. The active work that I'm doing right now is an R&D project that has that flavor. But you should not like sometimes. I'm trying to be emphatic about this. Like sometimes people look at things that like I'm doing or Robert's doing or somebody, and then they say like, oh, that's what Ember is doing. And that is like really could not be further from the truth. I think people sometimes go off and like work on an idea. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it actually like embroidery was like that. Maybe it ends up being really important, maybe it doesn't. But that doesn't mean that like everyone else is like waiting for that thing or like everyone is working on it. That's not like a good way to think about what Ember is doing. So that's just speaking for myself. Okay, that's all I have on that. And I do want more people to say things because I think it really is important to know what people are doing.
Yeah, just talking for myself, I think I've been I think pretty noticeably absent or more absent than usual the last maybe 6 months or so. Timing's not great, but this is how things work sometimes. Just a lot of stuff going on, personal stuff, work, whatnot. Just sort of decided to reevaluate how much time I'm spending additionally to work and sort of reevaluate that stuff and rebalance some things. So I've been pretty happy with the amount of folks jumping in and sort of filling the void. That's been amazing to see. Like there's been no pause in development on things like Ember Template, which was previously a project that I did almost all the work in. And a bunch of folks have sort of picked up all the slack there. It's just really great to see that. And the same is true across many, many repos. I'm trying to also make sure that I've enabled enough folks so that no individual project is like sort of stranded. So feel free to reach out to me if you feel like that is happening, and we can try to find out what to do. And this is not me saying goodbye or me out of the project. I'm certainly very much involved. I'm still doing lots of stuff. I've just decided to sort of take a more passenger seat role than I have in the past.
I'll say for me, I definitely have been less involved over the past year. Literally my entire career has been working on Ember or Sprout Core prior to that. And, I think I am so proud of the work that this team did on Octane. Octane to me felt like the thing that Yehuda and I were trying to build in 2011, but we didn't know enough, and the technology and JavaScript were not advanced enough. And this team is such a great team, a functional team, a productive team, that it felt like a time that I could step back a little bit and catch my breath maybe. And also, there's other stuff going on in the world in the past 2 years that has affected a lot of people where they live, their family life, certainly their professional life in the great reshuffle. So I think it's not totally unexpected to see a little bit of uncertainty as people, figure out how to navigate the new normal, as they say. But it feels really good to get the band back together and start exploring new ideas again.
I just want to use this as an opportunity to give a shout out to a bunch of folks who, some of them may be on various core teams, but some of them are just folks in the community who step up and are really active. It's the people Matt mentioned who helped ship 4.0, like a lot of those are just really engaged community members that are hugely valued. Basically what is Ember doing is not just a question about what are framework core team members doing, right? And the whole project doesn't fly without real community contribution, and we get a lot of that. It's been really great to see. I'm always impressed at when we do something relatively future looking, like make the very first tooling for a V2 add-on. When that happened, before I even realized it, people I'd never spoken to about it picked it up and started using it, right, and contributing immediately back. And we get a ton of that. So in the engagement area, I think I've had the opportunity to be pretty highly engaged very recently, and I've seen, for example, really good work happening in the Adopted Ember Addons org, because the community really comes together and steps in and helps take care of the things that we're all depending on for our applications, even when the original maintainers need to hand it off. And that's what you want, right? You don't want to be dependent on one original maintainer. We've got, and this is coming up because Ember 4 meant there's a bunch of work to do across the ecosystem, and there's a lot of hands pitching in with that. And it's not to say that that work is done, but an awful lot of it is in flight. It's really good.
Fantastic. All right, thanks everyone for that. Kind of moving on into version 4.0. Now that it's released, one of the questions is, what's the plan for some of the RFCs that were put on pause, like enable embroider and set route component?
That's for
I
you,
think,
Robert.
I think
ahead,
there's a few things. I think we're actively pushing on a lot of those boundaries, trying to pick up where we left off. Some of them just have a big sort of chunk of time where we were focused on 4.0 stuff. But we're actively starting to pick things up. Things like single file components, which I know is not the title of the RFC. Please don't hate me. Also set route template, which I think probably needs a bit more work, but I think is broadly in the right shape that we want to go forward. Though I think that we need to contextualize that in terms of making sure that it doesn't conflict with future design and vision for routing layer stuff. And so there's still some considerations there. On the embroider side, I think at least internally at LinkedIn, we've sort of changed tactics slightly from what we were originally doing, which was trying to just land embroider in all the largest apps. And we've shifted to focus on landing embroider, migrating add-ons to V2, and of course testing in embroider and whatnot. Specifically because as we were updating those larger apps, it just turned into kind of a big pain and a hassle where add-ons were doing things that were not compatible. So we sort of shifted gears to do the thing that we have done in the past, which is very similar to the jQuery migration we did, where we rolled out testing in add-ons without jQuery first. That's why we rolled out testing add-ons with embroider safe and optimized a few versions back. And I think hopefully the next major milestone on the embroider side is making the V2 add-on format an actual RFC that people can talk about, not the published format, but the on-disk development format, and B, making that the default of generating a new add-on. I think those are the two next biggest milestones that we'll see. And I personally hope to see that happen in the next month or two, though for the RFCs, exactly when they land and when they happen, like that's anybody's bet. But I think those are the things that I'm excited about. And the short answer to the question after all that rambling is, yes, we are actively pushing forward the RFCs that were sort of put on hold.
Great. Anyone else wanted to hop in on that? There's kind of a related version 4 question that we got from our the live streamers. Thanks so much for asking questions. This was given we've had a big upgrade to v4 and a lot of deprecation removals. Do we have a plan for more code mods or other tools to help people transition in the move from v3 to v4? Who'd like to take that?
I don't have an answer to that question as stated, but I will say that CodeMods, the whole point of me framing Ember's structure as a seasonal structure is to show that so CodeMods are really a part of the polish step in the addition process, and that is where you would expect the bulk of that work to happen. I think the only thing that's a little weird about the 4.0 removals is that, so in the Octane, I can talk about Octane. In the Octane phase, all of the changes were going to be removed in the future, but they were significant, like going from curly to angle bracket. And in that case, we did the code mods during the addition, and then a future major release removed those features. That's not how it has to work. That's just like one direction. And I think, so the tactical question of like, are there any breaking changes that need code mods more urgently than Polaris is like a question for someone else. But I think you would expect to see a ton of code mods in Polaris. That's like where that work logically lives.
Yeah, I think to the concrete question, I think that there is, sorry, Ed, one sec. I'll kick it over to you. I think concretely, we will likely, so for a few things, obviously 4.0 happened a few, what was it, 10 weeks? I don't know exactly the timeline, but a month or two ago. And the next LTS hasn't released yet. I think we're still absorbing actually what the impact is and what the code mods might need to be done. Some changes, some removals were things that none of us were using, or very, very few. So exactly what is painful for apps to upgrade and not is still something we're discovering. For example, most of our apps aren't gonna go to a 4.x until a 4x LTS exists. So we haven't really started that mega polish step because we don't expect massive apps to be migrating so quickly. Now, great if you did, and there's awesome features you get, small bite size, like reduced confusion. There's loads of good things. It's just lots of our apps just aren't on the cadence where they're trying to do upgrades every 6 weeks anyways. So all that to say, I totally expect more code mods. Some exist already, but I expect more to come out as we get closer to that first 4x LTS.
I know Ed wants to jump in. I realized another obvious point, which is that I was just talking like literally about the code mods, but the thing that causes the pain for the most part is add-on compat. And exactly what Robert said, we're very early. Now we really try in both editions and majors to get a lot of the add-on compat out of the way before, like that's an important goal. But as a long tail matter, like some amount of it gets done as the thing rolls out in real life. And I think, so a certain amount of whatever the pain is right now won't be there in 6 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever.
Yeah, what I was going to add was just, it might be interesting for this group even just to get a little concrete on the stuff in 4.0 and what people are seeing in apps that breaks. The kind of things I've seen that come up most frequently, Yehuda's right, stuff in add-ons usually because it's much easier over time to just clean up deprecations in your own code. I'm seeing add-ons using the implicit this removal is one that gets people, definitely. That does have a code mod. I think it's a partially runtime powered code mod, right?
Yep.
But of course, you got to do
the way to run it with the Runtime Assist and with the telemetry. One problem with it is that there's not a great, as far as I remember, until very recently, there wasn't a template code mod for in your tests. So oftentimes the tests are where you might be fine, and the tests might not have been code modded.
That's right. Yeah,
I do believe that there's a PR, or maybe it's already released. But
it's released. It works now.
Sweet.
It's probably cold comfort for people, but the very fact that it's so hard to code mod this thing is why we made the change.
Yeah, why we had to get rid of it. Exactly. Well, that's also an important point that I wanted to touch on as we kind of list out things about upgrades. Stuff that's very easy to mechanically see what's going on we don't necessarily have to break it because it's easy to see what's going on, right? It's the hard stuff that we're trying to untangle. So there's fundamental changes. I think that I think we did a really good job at 4.0. I don't think there's deep programming model changes, and I think you've got really good deprecation warnings on most of the stuff, but it will take time to get across the add-on ecosystem. Other stuff I've seen, like the global Ember, the removal of the Ember global is the other one that Addons use definitely. And that is important. It's a really important change that is people that ask a lot of future facing questions about using faster build tools, using native modules more natively using ES modules. All that stuff is really conditioned on us respecting web standards, respecting the ES module spec. And so this is a perfect example, like why are we making you get rid of the Ember global? Why do we have to go through add-ons and make them get rid of it? And it's because of that, right? Ember ships as ES modules. To get an ES module, you have to import it. You don't just go grab a global. We just need to follow that rule. So that's another thing I'm seeing in across add-ons as people upgrade. What are other people seeing, right? As like break blockers for apps?
I keep seeing send action is one that's been very easy to kick down the road and never handle even in an app, but then it's everywhere.
Yep.
So, but also pretty impossible to code mod, I think.
I think, Ed, what I hadn't thought about it like what you just said, but I think most of the breaking changes these days are really about ecosystem integration, and I think that it's first, like, that's both a true fact, but I think it motivates them pretty well, because like in your own life you probably care about, like in terms of future proofing, like if you want to break something, break the thing that's going to make it work better with the outer ecosystem, because it like if you have no choice, because then in a year or two from now your code base will still work. I think that, like, I have to think more about whether I think that's like the whole story, but it's
yeah, exactly. And where we've really had successes is when we've gone all in on standards, and just like our very early adoption of ES modules is really the saving grace that means you can do embroider and you can move forward with the vast majority of code actually being legible, right? Even though for a long time that it has been kind of fake in the sense that it all got transpiled to different things that were not ES modules by the time they were running. The fact that we got people authoring in that format way back, right, when it was a very new standard, is what really put us on such a firm foundation, and just doubling down on that concept of sticking to standards.
The same is true about
promises too, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. And it was the same thing, right? Our promise implementation was not the built-in one, but we had one. We had an implementation. Yeah, and we helped. Exactly, and we helped make the actual spec. And then when the spec was finalized, we adapted ours to match the spec. And then gradually, you haven't needed it anymore. You can use the native ones. So it's another example. Yeah.
So yeah,
I do also want to call out. Sorry, go ahead, Yuta.
I was just saying it's a good guide for the future, and I think it does match what we're actually doing. So anyway.
Yeah, I do also want to call out a thing that Ron LSC mentioned in the YouTube chat, which is that the CodeMods are a community effort. If you see a need for a CodeMod, make one. There's a CodeMod CLI project that lets you generate a thing that has a nice wrapping harness to make it very convenient to do. For example, you don't have to use that, but you can. There's Ember template lint that lets you have template code mods that you can add fixtures for. I think it's very great. You should try it. I'm obviously very, very biased. But the point is, all those code mods that are on like github.com/Ember code mods, those are almost all done by community members. Sometimes me as like scratching my own itch about a given migration in an app that I was struggling with or whatever, but make a code mod, reach out, we'll move it into the org. The more the merrier. Just like with the adopted Ember add-ons, it's very much one of those things where like together we can actually make code mods much easier to maintain. And the more of us that have a need and just, hey, I'll fix this one little thing, the easier it is for us, the rest of us, actually do upgrades. That's one of the great things about the Ember community is we're all trying to build higher together. So leveraging that energy and that effort, instead of just fixing it in your app manually, maybe make it a little code mod and push it up to GitHub. Others can use it.
Great. Kind of on a similar note in the world of contributions. Somebody had asked before we started chatting here that there's a limited number of people who know enough about Ember's internals to contribute. How can we open up to more contributors without weighing core team down so much that it's overwhelming?
We can delete code in Ember 4.0. No, like I think that is actually part of it. Like some of the things that are the hardest to work on in the code base are the stuff that was obscure that I don't even think people realized was there anymore. Like you could still use a globals mode resolver for app dot something to load up your Ember app. Like those kind of code paths and the complexity in the test suite to support that stuff makes it harder. And I think as we like do the kind of the removals in 4.0, those things don't bring tons of value for apps. I guess I disagree with Robert. They don't really like unlock tons of new things for apps when you do Ember 4.0. What they unlock is our capability as contributors and maintainers of the framework to be able to do the necessary work for the next round. So I think that that's like one great way that we have, like right now, the code base is in a much better spot. We deleted 15% of the code base in the 4.0 process. So it's getting more manageable.
And I think we're even set up, we're poised to be able to drop more stuff. Stuff is better isolated now than it was before, because the sort of the way things sort of spread throughout and were caused to crossover module boundaries and whatnot was also very difficult to reason about. And there's even some stuff that we probably still need to continue pushing to get rid of. Some details around the older like CP observer model still are difficult to reason about. Chains and whatnot. Those concepts are hard concepts. The new reactivity model feels great for a reason. It is easier for the most part to think about. But even on that side, we have more things to do to figure out good debugging tools and good visualizations and whatnot for when things are recomputing and all that stuff. Anyways.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Oh yeah, my answer to how do you get more people contributing is, in addition to all the things that were just said, is to like double down on what's special and unique about Ember, and then don't be weird where you don't have to be weird, right? So that's part of the point on trying to use more, like leverage all the other big investments that other people in JavaScript make into JavaScript build tooling. ES modules is a standard. It's not an Ember standard. It's a JavaScript standard. Like if you follow the standard, you get more standard tools and just less custom stuff to maintain. And as another example of that is that we've pushed hard on getting everybody onto Ember auto import, which is kind of a good polyfill for the full embroider, where it's just like use NPM the way NPM is intended to be used, not because NPM is perfect, but because it's big and it's got everything you want. And like the point of that is to like now there's a lot less. We can spend our effort on the unique and important things in Ember, and not on just making an Ember specific wrapper for some library, or an Ember specific wrapper for some things, so that you need not just add my library, but add Ember-my library, and now somebody's got to spend their time maintaining it, right? Like let's just be able to use stuff more directly. And modifiers in Octane plus Ember auto import being standard in the thing makes that kind of integration so much nicer. And we could just spend our time on making Ember itself be great, and not spend our time on lots of glue and integration work.
And I think that also is exactly the same thing we're doing in the TypeScript efforts. Like we're slowly sort of ramping up. There's a bunch of RFCs for that. Those are also we're trying to work on those collectively. But then even just internal to the repo, the better we can describe things with TypeScript, just that means it's easier to reason about. Like the TypeScript has problems when the code is bananas and really not hard to reason about. And fixing those things and reducing those and making it nice typing wise usually just makes it nicer to for other people to jump into and work in and understand what's going on. And it makes editor integration nicer and all sorts of other stuff just better broadly. Even if you don't want to use TypeScript, I think. I think it's just a better overall thing.
There's one thing I would add that piggybacks on what Ed said, which is that it is also true that breaking apart Ember and generalizing it helps with contribution. So historically we did stuff like Glimmer, but like more importantly, like RSVP, which we don't need anymore. Those, even Backburner, right? We did it to some extent and we continue to do it. I think on top of just like use the ecosystem is good, and like make our own code base better, which is good. There's also try to break it up, try to break Ember up so that there are pieces of Ember that are easily comprehensible and ideally could be used outside of Ember, so that the contributor base isn't. There's like two benefits. One, the contributor base can be people who are not inside of Ember, and then two, those people will force you to not like get too coupled to Ember. I think that's all good, because like tomorrow's Ember is not today's Ember anyway.
And the the one thing I want to add is like I agree with what everyone already said, but I think another way that we're doing it is by breaking down the Ember internal concepts and like basically exposing more of the capabilities in a more rationalized way. And I think as part of doing that, like we're putting up, like not just us, but like community members too, are like writing a lot of like seemingly in the weeds and low level RFC. But like if you want to, like for example, like we could have just built Glimmer component, right? Like, but instead we like the RFC that we actually did was the component manager RFC that like is like very low level in the weeds, but it documented all the integration points between Ember and what like a component system or component class is, and like that is pretty good documentation for someone who's like wanting to contribute, wanting to understand how things work, or just experimenting with alternative versions of like components, routers, and stuff, right? Like, and I think we are like I think we have more to do there, and certainly we'll be doing more like in the area of like rendering the router. There's the default helper manager, modifier manager, like, and I think like all of those. I think basically the like what I'm getting is like I think would be great if the core is smaller and not so mysterious, because like the thing that you get from like Ember out of the box is also things that you could also like implement yourself, right? Like, and I think that's just generally a better place for us to be, and the RFC process serves as the on-ramp for like the potential contributors in those areas.
Great, thanks everyone. That was wonderful. Kind of on a little different note, what capabilities or features are the core team excited to experiment with in a post-embroider world?
Sounds like an Ed thing.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to keep talking. I was giving other people a chance, but I mean, I'm really excited that we're really, and not even like, this isn't even a super future looking question. This is really a very near term thing I'm excited about, is making things in Ember very pay as you go, because as of Ember 4, we've put once you get over all of the removals of Ember 4 and all the requirements of Ember 4, there's nothing stopping us from shipping Ember 4 itself as a V2 formatted add-on, which if you aren't familiar is just, it's a much more static way to ship code. And in a V2 add-on, anything that doesn't get imported from there just doesn't get into the app, and it's all what you'd want it to be, using ES modules like as ES modules. And that's going to mean that without a new breaking changes, without a 5.0, an app that just doesn't refer to certain Ember features doesn't have to have them in their app, right? If you don't use, I mean, that's not to say it's all automatic, right? There's work to do internally, like, every Ember app has an Ember object in it today because it's really being used. It's being used to back your routes and et cetera, et cetera. But the infrastructure is now in place that any feature you aren't using won't have to be there. And it means that people can, there's an incentive now to really do the work of decoupling things, because apps will benefit immediately without having to wait for breaking changes and removal cycles. So it creates new energy and impetus to land all that stuff now that the infrastructure supports that kind of thing. So I like that, just because it means like a brand new app using all brand new patterns can be extremely focused and easy to contribute to, easy to debug, because it will have less stuff going on in it, right? Without breaking the existing apps that need more of the legacy code, who can pull it in when they need it, but it wouldn't be pulled in until you need it.
To make a very, like a maybe overly general statement, there's a lot of things that people want, like server-side rendering, edge rendering, code splitting. Like there's a whole bunch of features that I would say like are bucketed into like things that performance-minded people claim is good about other ecosystems or whatever. And I think Ember has actually done almost all the legwork inside of Ember's framework itself to make that stuff work. And like many people, many ambitious people have, for example, made SSR work in some form or another with a lot of work at the bundling level to make that good and have to deal with code splitting. I think for me, this is like, what is good about Embroider is that it takes all that work that we already did, like sometimes years ago, and makes it possible to actually just plug it into the place where that would make most people able to use it. So like things like route-based code splitting, tree shaking, being able to run things at the edge, being able to do SSL, like all these things are, it's going to be like it will be a quantum leap improvement, because that the embroidery thing is kind of like the last domino in a work that we largely did.
We got about 5 minutes. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
we got about 5 minutes left.
I can absorb 5 minutes easily, Carl. You know me.
I was gonna go lightning round real quick. But
don't even worry. Y'all missed the question. It was a post embroidery world, so not embroider stuff. What's the stuff you're excited about after embroidery? That was the question.
I thought
you gotta pay attention to the
embroider
question.
landed. What is good?
Yeah.
Well, I see.
I want builds entirely in the browser that do everything that our node-based builds do.
I want the thing that Ed demoed at EmberConf. Mo, I think Mo
exactly Mo, which is still an experimental level thing, but it's what I'm excited to use once Ember is all on 100% ES modules. A tool like that is great.
Builds.
Yes, it's very hard to motivate. Like I did the original prototype and Ed made it work for a demo, and like that, it's very hard to motivate continuing to invest in that in the Ember space right now before embroider lands. Yeah. Like you can do it. It like works it's easy to motivate as a demo.
All right, Carl, hit us with some lightning.
A few. Here's really quick ones, either one word or one sentence answers. Have you all been looking at some of these newer frameworks like Next and Remix?
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have anything to learn from or pull in and steal?
Yes.
Great.
Always. We're the board. You will be assimilated.
You missed solid. Matters.
When will Ember CLI support the current Node LTS?
Wah, wah.
You need one
word.
Soon.
No, I'm kidding. That was not a real answer.
Soon.
Cool.
Soon is a good.
Is there a release date for the first 4.x LTS? Probably 4.4.
There's no date. I answered this in the Ember video chat. Katie knows the date probably, but it's just 6 week release cycle. It's gonna be 4.4. And when 4.5 releases, 4.4 will be LTS. So do calendar math. I can't do it.
Sometime in June, so it'll be before 3.28 loses its LTS. But
and how about an opinion question? Is everything moving towards derived data patterns, or should that happen?
Unknown and yes.
Fantastic. Jen, I think it's about time. Should I hand it back over to you?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you so much, everybody. That was great.
Yeah, thanks everyone for this Q&A session. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions ahead of time, who submitted questions live. I've got your questions here. We've got a list, and you can expect to see over the next few weeks in the Ember Times. We're going to try to hit some of those other questions that we didn't get to, or that just didn't fit the format for a live Q&A like this. I'd also like to thank Carl as our facilitator. For our listeners, anyone who wants to stay current on what's happening in Ember, you can read more at our blog, which is blog.ember.js.com. You can subscribe to the Ember Times, which features information about what's going on across the whole Ember community. There's also some upcoming events happening online within the Ember community in the next few months. We got things like EmberConf, Ember Ignite. There's meetups happening. So if you want to connect with other people, please visit ember.js.com/community, and you